We need science communication. We need to break down the complexity of the things, of AI, of plant science as well, of course. I think that the Science Slam itself is a very intense kind of conveying scientific content. So people will have to listen. They are forced to sit and listen to what is happening on the stage.
And I think it is important to tackle challenges based on facts. At the same time, just throwing cold facts at people is not going to get them enthusiastic for the science.
So I feel that the aspect that really need to be communicated is that agriculture has always been revolutionized by technology. And I think the very basic of what genome editing brings about and how actually it works is something that's important for most people to understand.
In this episode of our World of Farming podcast, we focus on the highly relevant topic of science communication. In the first part of the episode, we give you an exclusive insight into the KWS Science Slam 2024. This annual KWS internal event invites employees to present complex topics from their area of expertise to their colleagues in an entertaining and engaging way. In the live excerpts we have selected for you, our colleagues Svenja, Roland, Natalja and Manny talk about a day in the life of a cabbage-stem flea beetle, about how we can help plants to help themselves, and about the topic of genome editing. You will now hear our event moderators introducing the slammers, and then you can listen to some snippets from their presentations. Afterwards, some of the slammers will share their thoughts about their experience at this year's Science Slam with us. In the second part of this episode, I will then have the pleasure of welcoming a guest who has a great deal to say about both the Science Slam and science communication in general. Enjoy!
So without further ado, I will introduce our first slammer of tonight, and that is Svenja Bänsch. And she will tell us something about a beetle's life at KWS. So Svenja has been with KWS since 2022, and she works as a scientist in our phytopathology services. And also in her private life, she kind of has a thing for insects, you could say, because she's a beekeeper, actually here in Einbeck. And she will introduce us to the life of the cabbage-stem flea beetle. And she will explain what we do with this little critter and also what it's good for after all. So Svenja, the stage is yours. Please come up.
Okay, so also welcome from my side to everybody. I'm happy that so many people came. So first of all, I have a question for you. So who is using rapeseed oil in their kitchen? Okay, I see many of you. But I have to tell you that oilseed rape production is at risk, and that's because of the cabbage-stem flea beetle. Before I start with the real-life struggles, I would like to tell you a short tale about this cute beetle. So once upon a time, in a vibrant agro-ecosystem filled with green and colorful plants, there lived a curious little beetle named Ollie. Ollie was no ordinary beetle. He was a cabbage-stem flea beetle, known by the wise folk as Saluja chrysocephalus. With a shiny black body and sturdy, powerful legs, he could jump high into the air, dancing among the leaves. Yet, despite his impressive jumps, he was not a flea, he is a beetle, and he took great pride in his unique talents. Ollie adored brassica plants, and much to the dismay of the farmers, especially the beloved oilseed rape. In late spring, he will hatch from the pupae. As a very young beetle, Ollie would venture into the fields, nibbling on the tender leaves of oilseed rape. At this stage, he is really, really hungry, but that appetite did not cause significant harm, because the plants have already a lot of biomass. After indulging in the delicious greens, Ollie would take a well-deserved summer siesta, eating almost nothing but sipping dewdrops, patiently awaiting the arrival of the most delectable treats. When late summer arrived, Ollie sprang into action, drawn to the young oilseed rape plants that had begun to unfurl their cotyledons, like little hands reaching for the sun. He would resume his feasting, sometimes leaving only small holes in the leaves, but at other times nibbling so fiercely that the plants would even die. In the midst of his feasting, Ollie would find a mate, and the female beetles would lay their eggs next to the plants. From these eggs would emerge tiny Ollie Junior larvae, who could burrow into the stems to feed during winter. This journey of nourishment could spell trouble to the farmers again, leading to winter losses. And as the seasons turned, the circle of life would begin anew, with each spring bringing a new adventure for Ollie and his friends in the enchanted agro-ecosystem. So this is the story of the cabbage-stem flea beetle Ollie, and it's a nice story for him, but actually not a nice story for us, because we would like to keep our oilseed rape oil. And what do we need? We need a strong and resistant and powerful oilseed rape plant that can defend itself against the cabbage-stem flea beetle. And how can we find this resistant and strong plant? So of course we need plants. We need genetic resources to screen. And these are coming from the breeder's side. And we need, of course, the beetle to have a plant-insect interaction we can look at. So this beetle is our enemy because it feeds a lot on oilseed rape, but we also keep it, and it's kind of a pet. So if you have a close look at him, and you can ever come to us and have a look at it if you want to, it's really, really cute. I would like to end with a small poem because I thought it fit to the story I told you in the beginning. So in fields of green where rapeseed grows, a hidden magic gently flows. With sturdy leaves and potions rare, it guards against the beetle's snare. And hopefully we will find this resistant, tolerant and strong plant to keep our rapeseed oil. Thank you.
Thank you so much for introducing Ollie to us, Svenja. How did you come up with the idea of building your slam around him?
So I had already in my mind that a story about an individual could be really nice. So I decided, what I actually did to make a story about one individual beetle and explaining the life cycle. And this beetle is also a big topic in our group, so we are doing a lot of research on this and also a lot of operative work. And I found it nice to use this chance to share this experience we have with the colleagues at KWS and also to show what is needed, what is necessary, what is behind the whole insect resistance breeding program, and also to show that we actually have these beetles in-house so that they're really living here and we are working with them, and that's not only theoretical but really operative work what we are doing here at the campus.
Why do you think we should talk and communicate more about insects and entomology?
For the public, insects are a really important topic, so they have different functions in our ecosystem. So of course they can be pest species or damage plants if they occur in a great number, but there are also so many other insects that have beneficial functions like biocontrol or pollination. And it's really important that the public is also aware of these functions the insects can have.
And the cabbage-stem flea beetle in particular?
So for the cabbage-stem flea beetle, but also for many other insect species, there are many questions that are not answered yet. And in the scientific community, it's important to share this information, to share what we have, so that new questions can also arise from this and we can answer questions we have, especially on the feeding behavior, because many parameters can have an influence on the feeding behavior, and that's pretty important to know for our test system development we are working on. But also for the public and especially for those who are closely related to agriculture, it can be important because it's good to understand the life cycle and the different parameters that can affect this individual, how they behave, so that they can derive management option from these.
So it's my great pleasure to introduce Roland Schwarzenbacher. Roland, just a few words to you. Roland joined KWS, I think, 1.5 years ago. You're a manager in regulatory affairs. What I saw, you have a very remarkable CV. You had already quite different stations, academic stations. And what was really nice, the story how you ended up in plant science. So I just read here. So you studied law, then you reviewed a document on genetic engineering of yeast for brewing. Yeah? You said, this is so cool, what you can do there. So you switched to biology, but you ended up with animal models, so you did not really like that. And you said, okay, let's give it a try to do a PhD in plant science. And today your talk will be on helping plants to help themselves.
The farmers labor, work and toil to grow the crop from seed and soil. But though they work both day and night, they cannot ward off every blight. Aphanomyces and Cercospora, Ligas, Lixus and Lepidoptera, Phoma and also wireworm. How can our poor plants stay firm? So we treat the seeds and the farmers spray to keep the pests and diseases away. But by combining evolution and science, we can reduce our pesticide reliance. We can, by priming the plant's immunity, we protect the yield sustainably. We leave the fungicides on the shelf and help the plant to help itself. At KWS, we are passionate about plants, right? We love to see happy, healthy plants. But of course, it's a dangerous world, and there are many stresses, biotic and abiotic stress factors, which can make plants unhealthy. And so to protect our crops, we use different strategies like irrigation, crop rotation, and fungicides. But today I want to tell you about another strategy to keep our crops healthy and alive. Immune priming, or using the plant's own innate immune system to defend itself against all these diseases and pathogens. Over the course of millions of years of coevolution, plants have evolved a very sophisticated and very efficient immune system, which is slightly differently structured than our own mammalian system, but is very efficient at protecting the plants from various pests and diseases. So if only we could boost the plant's immune system, this could help us to help the plants help themselves. Today I want to talk about a compound which I worked on before I joined KWS, when I was still at the university. And this compound is called beta-aminobutyric acid. Now everybody repeat after me, beta-aminobutyric acid. Yeah, it's quite a mouthful, isn't it? So I'll just call it BABA. And BABA is water soluble and very easily taken up by the plant through the roots. And what happens when you treat plants with BABA is that you get a small induction of the plant defense system. So some enzymes are activated, some defense compounds are produced. But after a short while, the plant defense system goes back into its basal state. So somehow, BABA induces a memory in the plant so that when the plant is later attacked by a pathogen, it responds with a faster and stronger immune response. And very often, this immune response is enough to actually keep the plant healthy.
Hi, Roland. Congratulations on your contribution. Very interesting. Could you tell us why you decided to talk about immune priming today?
Agriculture is facing big challenges, particularly in regard to crop protection, where more and more synthetic plant protection products are phased out due to environmental concerns or concerns for human health. And I think biological products have the potential to fill the gap that is left by the loss of synthetic plant protection products, but they are not always quite there yet in terms of efficacy. And I think this project was a really nice example of interdisciplinary work where a team of biologists and a team of chemists work together to develop a sustainable and biological plant protection solution.
You started your slam with a poem. What made you choose this format?
Partly it's just personal preference that I really like poetry, and partly I chose this form because poems give you a bit of artistic freedom. They give you the license to maybe be a bit less exact on the science and focus more on the message that you want to deliver.
More generally, how important do you think good communication is for plant science?
I think it is absolutely crucial. Food and the environment are two very emotional topics, and most people understandably tend to have an opinion on it. At the same time, most people don't really have any practical experience either in farming or molecular biology. So I think it's really important to communicate well to people what are the challenges and what are the possible solutions. And I think it is important to tackle challenges based on facts. At the same time, just throwing cold facts at people is not going to get them enthusiastic for the science.
It's my pleasure to introduce not just one, we will have a couple. So it's Natalja Beying and Manny Saluja. Manny, she will be online. Natalja, you already see her on stage preparing. Just a few words. So both ladies, you're working as a scientist in genome editing. Natalja, I think you joined 2021. Manny, 1 year later. Natalja, I heard you were really inspired by the last Science Slam, yeah? You said, yes. Okay, let's use this format. Because what I learned from you both is that you really want to take away some concern about genome editing. And you said this might be a great platform for doing so. So this is also already going into your talk. So it's about let's play with scissors.
Okay, so hello everyone. This is me, 3 years old, and my parents often ask me to be very careful with tools. At some point, we all have heard, don't play with scissors.
Yeah, and this is me. I'm around 4 or 5 years old. And maybe like me as well around this age, you might have heard the more German phrase, Messer, Gabel, Schere, Licht, dürfen kleine Kinder nicht. But today, fortunately, we're all grown up. We are scientists in agriculture. And every day at work, we can play with a lot of different tools. So let's take a look at our plant breeding toolbox.
Indeed, I think these tools are wonderful. And I also see that it requires a lot of efforts to develop these varieties. So we may made a smart product, but I'm wondering, did we produce it in a smarter way? So to answer that today, we want to introduce a new complementary tool that adds more value, and that's genome editing. And we also call it molecular scissors. It has many variants and provide precision, flexibility to address different editing needs. And as a genome editing scientist, our favorite tools are, no doubt, scissors. So let's play with them today and see what we can do. Natalja, with such a diverse toolkit, I would say sky is the limit. And we can go as far as rearranging the whole genome. And we call it as chromosome engineering. Think there is a chromosome model in front of you, Natalja?
Yes, there it is.
Wonderful. Let's make a translocation today. Let's exchange 2 arms of a chromosome with one another, which can also actually happen naturally. For this, more than one cut is needed. So Natalja, please cut each chromosome once. And
yes.
During the repair, sometimes it can happen that the cell sticks the different DNA pieces together.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So, yes, I'm very much now looking forward to use these tools in our plant breeding activities.
Wonderful.
And I'm happy to tell you that we are actually doing it. So at KWS, we already use the molecular scissors to support breeding activities and develop more resilient crops. Benefit is that we are contributing to sustainable agriculture as our crops are strong enough to fight pathogens and climate changes by themselves.
Hi, Manny. Thank you very much for introducing us to a very complex topic. Why did you use this occasion to talk about genome editing?
So I work on a genome editing team, and this is my daily work. So I know what kind of value it adds to the trade development and agriculture. And I also thought that it's a good thing if a scientists who are working so closely with the technology also go out and help others to understand such a complex topic in a more simplified way.
In your opinion, which aspects of the topic are in particular need of communication?
So I feel that the aspect that really need to be communicated is that agriculture has always been revolutionized by technology. And I think the very basic of what genome editing brings about and how actually it works is something that's important for most people to understand. And if they can correlate with the traditional breeding methods, it's more or less similar. You just have a tool to do the same thing.
These were fascinating impressions from our KWS Science Slam 2024. A special thanks to my colleagues. Now I'm very happy to welcome David Spencer for the second part of this podcast episode. Great to have you with us today, David.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Let me introduce David a bit more in detail to you. Dr. David Spencer, born in 1991, is a molecular biologist and science communicator. He earned his PhD in molecular plant physiology from RWTH Aachen University. In addition to his research, he is active as a podcaster, science slammer, and author, focusing on sustainable agriculture. In the spring of 2022, his book Alles biologisch was published. That same year, David Spencer was awarded the SkyCom Award by the German Botanical Society. As a board member of the Eco-Progressive Network and the initiative Progressive Agrarwende, he continues to advance the discourse on modern plant breeding in Germany's scientific community. David, before we start with our actual topics for today, what is your favorite crop and why?
I think I'll have to say potato, because I think potato is just so iconic for Germans, but for Central Europeans as well, because it's actually a crop that came to us through domestication in the Andes, and it belongs to the family of nightshades. So it's very well researched in terms of phytopathology questions. And it's also a great example for diversity of varieties that are out there. Because if you ever been to South America, you know there are thousands of potatoes that all look differently, they taste differently. So there's not just one variety that is produced. But if there's only like a very low amount of varieties, then that can also have effects on, for example, food security, which we have seen in the middle of the 19th century. So I think the Great Famine that happened in Ireland, for example, as a real-world example of how plant defense and resistance breeding can have an impact on our lives, is also a great start for science communication.
Okay, we never heard a potato on that question before. So thanks for this new input and also for the explanation. Great. Yeah, first of all, we all got some impressions of this year's KWS Science Slam at the beginning of this episode. What's your view on this kind of event?
I think it's just fantastic that also KWS as a company understands science communication as a very diverse field, meaning that you can also do or like experience science communication within your own company using different kind of language to talk to each other, especially if working like transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary. Then there's also vocabulary, languages, like terms that a phytopathologist might understand, but then a bioinformatic worker will have problems to understand. So it's sometimes funny and interesting how people can, like within one institution, also can have these kind of misunderstandings. But I think Science Slams is a perfect format to do so. And I think all of the presenters that we heard before, they did a great job.
Yeah, I think so too. And the Science Slam format has played an important role also in your career. You started out in science communication as a science slammer. What is it about this format that fascinates you, and what are maybe the specific challenges for a science slammer?
I think that the Science Slam itself is a very intense kind of conveying scientific content. So people will have to listen. They are forced to sit and listen to what is happening on the stage, just like in a concert, for example, which is quite different from, for example, posts on social media where everyone, well, you have to get the attention first. Otherwise, people will just scroll on and miss the piece of information that you're trying to spread. But in Science Slams, you always get like these direct, unfiltered reactions from the audience, which is really nice because you are mirrored sort of when you say something too complex, people will go like, I didn't get that, and you will directly see that in the faces. So I really like this kind of stage to practice to break down science. And also humor is a good vehicle to convey messages that are complex on the one side, but also serious on the other side. So this is what I really like about Science Slam as a format. Challenges can be diverse. So not everyone's a stage hog like me. Not everyone likes the stage. The limitation of 10 minutes is also challenging for people. And there's also like a discrepancy between seriousness and joking around. So I think there are scientists who would say this kind of joking is not really fit for scientific content. If you go to conferences, you would rather prefer a more serious and sober kind of reporting from your own research. So I think, in my opinion, this humorous approach is kind of disruptive, and I really like this way of communicating complex stuff so people would more easily get access to what we are doing.
Yeah, that already leads me to another question I have. I think in many areas of science that are highly relevant to society, they are at the same time not easily accessible without having a specialized background. This also applies to many areas of plant science, for example. And I have two questions on this. First one is, what role do you think science communication can play in this context?
I think it has a big role in bridging technological innovation and public acceptance. So I just came from a conference on science communication called Forum Wissenschaftskommunikation. And there the big motto, the topic was the role of science communication for a strong democracy. So you can already see from this very current and just burning topic at the moment that we need science communication. We need to break down the complexity of the things, of AI, of plant science as well, of course. But we have seen in so many examples how science literacy or missing science literacy can have effects on our real world. For example, COVID or the climate discussion, the growing populism as well in politics, and the gender discussion. So we have many examples where out of missing or out of a missing link between science and the public, there can be misunderstanding, there can be misinformation as well. So we need actually science communication to build our opinions in a democratic society.
Yeah, and my second question is, and maybe we already felt that in your previous answers, in the video message that you did for our Science Slam, you mentioned that personal fascination is key. What is your personal motivation for engaging in science communication?
So I've always been a veggie gardener. I've always been a fan of cooking and spices, trying out different dishes from all over the world. I've always advocated for the protection and restoration of nature, but also I'm a plant scientist and I worked with genetic engineering. And this seeming antagonism, this seeming contradiction is what I'd love to break up. So my fascination for both the organic world, for the traditional things that are in the world of farming that we're discussing here, and modern innovations, this dualism motivated me to go out and talk about how these things are actually not mutually exclusive. In fact, they go very well together.
Yeah, we will surely come back to this again later. Now I would like to talk about your latest book. So in that book, which is called Alles Biologisch, you explore the superpowers of plants and how we can use them for more ecological agriculture. Can you tell us which superpowers plants have and how we can harness them?
Oh yeah, I think we heard beautiful examples already in the Slam talks. I always start off by imagining how a plant is standing alone on the field. Well, most of the time it's not alone, but just imagine a single plant on a field and all these kind of stresses that are coming down on it all the time. So the sun is burning, or maybe if there's bad weather, then there's also rain and all these kinds of weather conditions that are changing, and the changing climate as well, of course. Then there are animals and fungi and bacteria attacking the plant all the time. And the important thing is that plants cannot run away. Like we as animals, we have the ability to, with our nervous system, to recognize something is coming and then quickly change our location, right? And plants are most of the time fixed to the ground through their roots, but this does not change anything about their resilience. So they have evolved mechanisms of using like natural sunscreen on their leaves to protect themselves against UV, damaging UV light which can be damaging for DNA. They evolved antioxidants. They evolved secondary metabolite that ward off pathogens very efficiently. And then they, of course, communicate with each other, which we just are beginning to understand through their roots, but also through volatile compounds that flow through the air. And to me, this is just like almost magic, but since we have science, we can try to understand and use that for breeding as well.
So your work as a science communicator is a lot about simplifying and kind of translating very complex things. Can you give us an example of how you approach this?
Think about your target audience first. So I said already that if you're talking to colleagues, you might choose a different kind of vocabulary, a different kind of language than you would choose in front of a lay audience. Or maybe if you're talking to children, if you're talking to your parents, if you're talking to politics, then you would choose a different kind of format, right? And also a different kind of language. So this is the first thing to take into account. And then always try to leave out the very complex vocabulary. So no one needs the Latin words, because we have the species names in Latin in order to understand our other biologists from other fields or from other parts of the world. But nobody needs actually to know the Latin names. And then maybe another advice would be to narrow down your research topic to snackable contents, as I call them, like snackable nuggets of pieces of information that are easy to digest. And if you see the people, it arrives or it reaches, it evokes some kind of emotion, then you know, okay, it reached them, and then you can go on and try out the next snack. So always try small snacks in order not to overexpose people with scientific content.
Yeah, great. A lot of helpful advice for our upcoming science communicators. So this is great. Coming back to a topic we touched on before, in your work you frequently talk about green genetic engineering and other modern approaches to plant breeding. You also did your doctorate in this field at RWTH Aachen University, focusing on disease resistance in soya. At the same time, you are an advocate of an ecological sustainable agriculture. How do these two aspects, which are sometimes seen as contradictory in the public debate, fit together?
Mm-hmm. I already touched that before. So as I mentioned, it's only like a seeming contradiction. It's a seeming antagonism that is there, because if we are honest to ourselves, crossing and selection has always been the beginning. Crop plants are 100% a product of human domestication. So to me, there is we have to agree on that first. If we can accept that crop plants are different from natural or wild plants in that way, that they have always been changed by humans to fit our needs, then we can go on and say there is nothing more ecologically sustainable than a plant that can defend itself, for example. So we've heard before from Roland that plants have these intrinsic mechanisms of defending themselves. So why shouldn't we try to get these natural immune defense reactions back into our crops that we might have lost during the course of breeding, and by that trying to reduce or mitigate the use of chemicals on our fields or chemical pesticides. So for me, this is actually not an antagonism, not a contradiction, but a very good wedding. I think sometimes what people are trying to say is that they want more sustainable plants. but they say we want more natural plants. And there's a kind of confusion between these two terms, naturalness and sustainability. In German, they're also very close to each other, Natürlichkeit and Nachhaltigkeit. But these two ideas are maybe not the same if we look very close into them, because if we take fossil fuels like coal or gas or oil, these are natural, right? They are in the soil for thousands, maybe millions of years. So we could just use them and burn them to get energy, knowing that that might not be the most sustainable way to go. So the most natural way is not always the most sustainable way. And maybe this is a good starting point to start discussing about what we actually want to achieve in plant breeding. And then we can, discuss further what to do and where we want to go.
Do you already have an idea that you can share with us about how we can approach this better?
Well, so we can just honestly discuss that science has always brought us forward as a society, not only in, if we talk about food, but also innovation in the tech field. All of us use computers, we have smartphones, and they all contain like very high technology, thousands of patents and things that we are discussing in the plant kingdom. We could also discuss in other fields of life. So what I mean is, maybe what we mean if we say natural, we mean least invasive or least exploitive. So these are things we can talk about. But then we are talking about a very different level than just about the technology level, right? So we can say genetic engineering from the scientific side is very safe to use, at least not attached with more risks than everything we've used before. But there's other levels, like ethical levels, regulatory levels, that we also need to discuss. And this goes beyond what I could, for example, say as a plant researcher. We need farmers, we need public acceptance, we need political decision making in order to get to a regulation, to an agreement that everybody's fine with, which in the end leads us to more sustainable agriculture.
Yeah, and I would say this leads us again to the topic of scientific communication, because to get public acceptance, you need to explain topics so that everyone is able to understand, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What I also found interesting is that in one of your videos, you were raising the question of, have we cultivated the plants, or have they in fact cultivated us? Can you give us some background on that?
Yeah, so it's funny because we are dependent on plant productivity. We are dispersing their seeds and we are dispersing species over the world. And actually our civilization, our work sharing is the result of overproduction. So when we started plant breeding, there was like barely enough for everyone to have enough food. But then we discovered ways of producing more food that we could actually consume. And this was the starting point for people leaving maybe the agricultural field and engaging in other jobs, like becoming physicians or musicians, whatever. So all the jobs that are out there, all the different kinds of cultural fields that we have now are the result of not everyone having to go out and collect or produce food. So I think in a way, we of course cultured the plants. We call them crops or culture crops, but they also on the other side allowed us to build up our culture.
We heard a lot of fascinating aspects regarding plant breeding and communicating about it so far. Is there also a downside of it? So what advice would you give to newcomers, even if we think of negative trends such as fake news, shitstorms against scientists, etc.?
Yeah, of course, it's dangerous outside sometimes because we as scientists, we are not always trained in how to deal with media, how to deal with this kind of public stages. We have seen that in the pandemic, that scientists all of a sudden overnight are exposed to a lot of opinions, a lot of commentaries on social media, a lot of public appearance as well. So I think the first advice would be stay calm and communicate on. So we are the experts on the field. We can evolve some kind of self-confidence, meaning that the facts that we know to be true, the facts that we are working all day long, that they are our weapons against fake news, against propaganda, against misinformation that has been deliberately put out. So my advice would be try to stay calm, even if the communication might be a more emotional field than you are used to in the scientific world. But this is actually human, and we can combine both the emotional and the very rational scientific world by trying to put our fascination out and explaining to the people why we need this kind of science.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Talking about your work, we noticed that you're working on plenty of different formats, books, YouTube, podcasts. Is there actually a favorite one for you?
Not really. I think diversification is key in that respect, because you never know which platform might not be available in a few years or so. For example, if we take X, formerly known as Twitter, these are, of course, private companies that can shut down any time. So if we just rely on one platform, for example, that might not be very sustainable. So I try to diversify because of that, but also because I think that in the different platforms, we reach different kinds of target audiences, which I mentioned before. If you want to reach the politicians, X would have been a good way to go. But now I think it's moving more towards LinkedIn. Also, Blue Sky is a very good platform. But then, as I said, Science Slams, live formats, books, all of these different formats reach a different target audience. And if we think that plant science is something that should be of interest for everybody outside, then we need different platforms. So this is why I have so many projects, and I like all of them.
Unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the episode already. Last but not least, what is your ultimate call for people to become involved in science communication?
In a polarized world, people are in desperate need or in desperate search for honest answers. And science might never be 100% sure. Science might never be completely objective, because we always have a bias, no matter how hard we try. But it's the closest we can get. So I think science can be a rock in stormy seas, especially now that we have an info crisis. People are looking for where they can get reliable information. And yeah, it gets harder and harder to tell apart info from disinfo or from fakes. So, as I said before, facts are our kind of weapons that we can use to contribute to a more open and democratic society. And this is why everyone who's interested should engage or try out some kind of formats in science communication.
Thank you so much, David, for joining our podcast. It was a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
That was our water farming podcast on the topic of plant science taking center stage, the KWS Science Slam. We look forward to your questions and comments.